Mr. Clerk, the time is 7 o'clock. I'll now call the meeting to order. Council, are there any declarations of pecuniary interest or general nature thereof? Seeing none, may I please have a motion to approve the agenda as amended with the additional item 16. Councillor Humphreys, Councillor Tom, any questions? Seeing none, all those in favor? Wonderful. Next up, we have the termination of items requiring separate discussion. I'll start on my left with Councillor Peary.
Item number 2, please.
Sorry, can you repeat that? 2, thank you. Councillor Kim?
I'm good, thank you.
Councillor Tom?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Is 16 automatically on?
It's on the agenda, but it hasn't been pulled yet.
I'll pull 16.
Thank you. Councillor Humphreys?
Item 12.
Mayor Daw?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Item 3, please, and, oops, where'd it go? Item 9, 3 and 9. Thank you.
Councillor Gardner?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Was item 1 pulled?
Not yet.
Item 7. And 14.
Just 7 and 14?
Yes, please.
Thank you.
1, 7, and 14.
1, 7. Councillor Maracus?
Nothing for me, thank you, Mr. Chair.
Members of Council, we've pulled items 1, 2, 3, 7, 9, 12, 14, and 16. Any other items? Seeing none, may I have a motion to adopt the items not requiring separate discussion then? Councillor Peary, Councillor Humphreys, all in favor? So moved. We have one delegation this evening, Ms. Nala Khoury, if she would like to come up and present. Ms. Khoury, just to let you know that the item that you're speaking to is not on the agenda tonight, but I believe it is up for council discussion on the 23rd.
Next week?
Maybe I just get some clarification from our director, Mr. Downey, first.
So, Mr. Chair, it will be on the agenda for the March 1st General Committee.
Perfect, thank you, just so you know.
Sure, thank you. We were told that tonight was the night, so we made those plans accordingly, and we appreciate your time tonight.
Absolutely. As you know, you have 5 minutes.
Thank you. I will likely be slightly over, and I'd appreciate the indulgence of council for that reason.
Is there anybody on council who would like to extend the time 5 minutes? Councillor Kim, Councillor Humphreys, a motion to waive procedural bylaw to allow the delegate to speak for more than 5 minutes. All those in favor? So moved.
Thank you very much. Good evening, members of council. My name is Nala Khoury, and I live on Mavernack Boulevard in Aurora. I'm here on behalf of many members of our community tonight. We understand that a final report is coming to council soon regarding the new master plan. Our purpose here tonight is to ask council to reject the consultant's recommendation as it pertains to the Mavernack land in the new master plan. I'll provide an overview of the 3 general reasons that we are urging council to reject the consultant's recommendation, and I will then elaborate on each reason. The first reason is that the consultant's conclusion that our neighborhood is over-serviced with respect to parkland is flawed and narrow. The second reason is that there is no expert information or investigative work in the report with respect to the Mavernack land. And the third reason to reject the recommendation is that it ignores the uniqueness and the history of the land and the story behind it, and it completely disregards the interests of those who live near the land and who essentially paid its purchase price through their cash in lieu of parkland reserve funds. I will now elaborate on each of these 3 reasons. The first reason to reject the consultant's recommendation is that the conclusion is based on a flawed analysis. If you look at page 59 of the new plan, the consultant's own work product, it shows 30 playgrounds west of Bayview, and it shows 3 playgrounds east of Bayview. That is a 10-to-1 ratio of playgrounds west to east. Yet somehow they conclude that we are over-serviced. Council, it defies logic. The basis of the consultant's recommendation that we should not get any parkland on Mavronack is because there would be an alleged redundancy or over-service given the skateboard park and the splash pad in our neighborhood. Of course, if you decide to put a skateboard park on Mavronack Boulevard, that would create a redundancy with respect to that particular feature. But can anyone honestly say that the area of town that lies northeast of Bayview and Wellington is over-serviced when it comes to trees, or that there's a redundancy of trees there? Can anyone honestly say that we're over-serviced with something as simple as park benches? We implore you to walk Mavronack Boulevard from St. John Side Road to Wellington and back again, and try to find a park bench to sit on. You cannot. And additionally, the walking distance that the consultants provide to the existing parks appears to be based on the walking speed of an adult male who has ideal health conditions, who's naturally a fast walker. But the parks are not walking distance for many toddlers and young children in our community, or other members of our community who are not at their prime physical fitness. Also, if there were indeed an abundance of parkland dedicated for our subdivision, then we would not have had to pay into the cash in lieu of parkland fund. Just 200 or so homes around the land, that little piece of the subdivision alone, paid $2 million into the cash in lieu of parkland reserve fund, between $8,500 and $14,000 per home. And the reason the town had us pay into that is because it could. Pursuant to provincial legislation, if there is an insufficient parkland dedication from a subdivision, cash can be paid in lieu of that parkland. So, the consultant's analysis may have somehow allowed them to conclude that we have an abundance of parkland, but provincial legislative standards that allowed the town to collect the cash in lieu of parkland funds from us in the very first place provide otherwise. The second reason to reject the recommendation that the consultants have provided is that there's no expert information and no investigative work as it pertains to the Mavronack land in the report. In our respectful opinions, the consultants have not brought their expertise to bear on this situation. There is no reason to defer to them, and there is no reason to rely on their judgment. They have given you no new information. To summarize what they told you, there's a skateboard park relatively close by. You already knew that. There are homes nearby. You already knew that. You can sell the land for profit. You already knew that. We expected practical, creative options from these consultants. Some fact-finding, some investigation, some research, interviews perhaps with people affected. They did not do any of that. To our collective knowledge, the consultants didn't interview the people within a half kilometer of the Mavronack land, or those that back onto it or face it. And if they did interview those people, we highly doubt that those residents said, there are simply no compatible uses, just throw up the white flag and sell it off. Additionally, the consultants directly ignored the motion from this council in September 2015, the operative part of which was to investigate and find green space or recreational options for the Mavronack land. That was 4.5 months ago. To my knowledge, nothing has happened on that yet. From the residents' perspective, it seems as if the consultants started out with a conclusion, which is to sell the land for profit and use the funds elsewhere, and then they selectively presented information to support that conclusion. The third reason to reject the consultant's recommendation is that the consultant's report ignores the history and the uniqueness of the land. This has been a long road for many residents. The Mavronack land stays unused, untouched, and closed off to residents, as it has for the better part of a decade. As you all now know, many residents paid premiums to back onto that land. Our subdivision also paid $2 million into the cash in lieu of parkland fund, which was almost the entire purchase price of the land, in addition to other charges and taxes that we have paid. Our town has been slowly, methodically moving in a certain direction regarding this land, starting with the inquiries that every resident made when they moved in, then the school board deciding not to use the land, then the realization that the town had a right to purchase the land with a right of first refusal at an extremely favorable price of $400,000 per acre enshrined in a 2007 contract. Then the town initiating a lawsuit against the developer, and then the town settling with the developer, and then the motion from council in September 2015 to investigate and come back with green space and recreational options for the land. These consultants are entirely external to that process. They were not part of it. They were not aware of it. We should not allow these consultants to completely derail the path that our town has been on. At the first public meeting in September 2015, the consultants were completely unaware of the Mavronack land. At the second public meeting in November 2015, they were completely unaware that it had been paid for by cash in lieu funds. And they were completely unaware that there had been a direction from council to investigate green space or recreational options for that land. What we view as a special piece of land that our town fought for, what we view as a gem that should be treasured, this report treats as an afterthought or as an avenue for money. Their recommendation completely disregards our interests. Members of council, we are in your hands. There's no litigation, there's no more contract, there's no threatened OMB proceedings, there's no contingency that we need to wait on. The town owns this land now. We got it at an incredible price. It has a very unique story. The community around the land almost directly paid its entire purchase price through their cash in lieu funds, on top of other taxes and charges. We are pleading with you, several years into this now, please do not sell it to a developer. The majority of council has committed to us through various mechanisms of communication that you would vote to ensure all 6 acres would be used for green space or recreational space or parkland or sports fields, basically public, open, recreational space. The majority of council has committed to that, and you have voted consistently with that for some time now. There is absolutely no reason to change course at this time. There is nothing that the consultants have told you that is new or expert-based or in fact anything at all that should change your mind. There remains a deficit of parkland in Aurora. Let's not lose sight of that key fact. There is no need to develop every single piece of vacant land in this town. We would ask you to critically analyze any suggestion that we're overserviced at that end of town, because it is baseless and it can be countered. Allowing parkland on Mavronack puts us within a reasonable range of other neighborhoods in Aurora. And for what it's worth, public sentiment is firmly on our side on this. If you look at the recent poll in the Auroran, the public is overwhelmingly rejecting the sale of the Mavronack land. Please reject the consultant's recommendation as it pertains to Mavronack. Thank you, and we would appreciate your thoughts.
Please. Thank you. Thank you, Ms. Corey. Can I have a motion to receive the delegation? Councillor Maracas, Councillor Gardner. Any questions or comments for the delegate? Councillor Humphreys, I'll start with you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. First of all, thank you very much, Ms. Curry, for coming forward tonight, and you do a great job representing the community and that end of town. I wanted just to apologize for tonight. I'm not sure who informed the residents that tonight was this item was on the agenda. As you heard, it's not going to be on for a couple of weeks. So, I look forward to seeing you again. And the residents, I'm so sorry for that inconvenience, but we hear you loud and clear and
Thank you.
appreciate it.
Just as a point on that, it may very well be that there's another time that this is going to come up. We were told tonight was a night. It's very difficult, obviously, once the ball is rolling to change course. It was only after we handed in the delegation request form that we were told that it had changed. I will say this, though. In a way, I'm actually, I'm glad to be here now rather than later. The sort of date seems to be undefined as of yet. And I think more importantly, the consultant's recommendation came to you at the end of January. I wouldn't want to let it sit unanswered for over a month. There was an article in the Aurora already about it on the front page. Like, we're not going to just not respond, I guess, and sit silently. So in a way, this is basically giving us multiple opportunities to speak to you.
Thank you.
Mayor Daw?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Ms. Curry, thank you for coming out tonight. Nice to see you again. There was a suggestion at council last week, and I don't know if you heard it or if you have any thoughts on it, but you're probably aware, that there's been talk about doing a tennis dome in Aurora. Right now it's going in down by the SARC, but there was a suggestion of potentially putting the tennis dome on that particular piece of property. Just wonder if there was any thoughts of the community around that. I would be curious more than anything else.
Well, I haven't specifically discussed a tennis dome with anyone else. My understanding is that, I guess, the area of land that's been selected is the one that's close to the SARC, and they're obviously a very vocal, motivated community, and I wouldn't want to suggest anything to them as to where anything should go. Generally speaking, I think sports field are welcome, as is any kind of parkland. I think the idea from our perspective is there must be a significant number of options out there. Whatever they are, whatever fits, whatever is workable, whatever is practical, we're happy to hear those recommendations and consider them further. My understanding is tennis might not fit the needs of the community that want to play tennis the most in the Mavronack location, but I know a lot of people wouldn't have any opposition to tennis. That said, it's somebody else's baby, the tennis court issue, and I wouldn't want to tell them how to go after it.
I was just curious.
Yeah,
Thank you very much for your answer.
problem.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Councillor Kim, then Councillor Perry.
Thank you, Councillor Thompson. Thank you, Ms. Curry, for delegating. And I'm not sure if it might have been myself to Councillor Humphrey's suggestion as to the scheduling of the report, but my idea was that I believe staff suggested it was February 16th, but that was recently changed. So some of you may have heard that from myself. So if there's any blame in terms of the actual date, then that might have been myself, but I believe today was supposed to be the date, but it's now been postponed to March 1st. So thank you again, and all those in attendance for attending, and it certainly shows the commitment of the neighborhood and the desires of the neighborhood. And I had the same question as Mayor Daw in terms of I'm sure there are varying opinions, and without talking or speaking to the item, there are varying opinions at the table. But I think one common denominator is we want to have that land be able to, ideally, to be of use to all of Aurorans and not just the Mavronack community. That would be in an ideal situation. So hopefully, there would be some creative options that could be available. And so I'm not going to talk too much about that because we're not talking about that today, but thank you very much for...
Sure. I appreciate your comments. I will say that the uniting force for all of us is that we want the land to be publicly owned recreational land, open space for use for everyone, obviously, all of Aurora. The specifics as to what goes there, none of us are experts. We don't know what fits. We believed it was in the hands of experts. We believe that's what was put in motion starting in September of 2015, and actually really when the town bought the land earlier last year. So specifically in terms of what goes there, I actually would just like to make this point as well. Just because people have differing views on what should go there, if someone has a particular love for trees and another person has a particular love for soccer. I don't want that to be any suggestion that our community is divided in any way, shape, or form. Those are superficial differences. We are all united in that we don't want any more development there. We want the town to own this land. We want it to be public land. We want it to be for recreational use, green space, open space, and available to all members of Aurora in a way that benefits obviously the needs of the entire town. I mean, it goes without saying. So, where there may be superficial differences in how the land should be used, we are united on a lot of layers. With respect to the future use of this land, and I just want to make sure that that's really clear to everybody.
And through you, Mr. Chair, to Mrs. Curry, are you aware in terms of, would there be a drastic difference of opinion in terms of what goes on there? Because those who did pay a premium that live adjacent to the land might have a different view from those who live across it. If there's a tennis bubble, that might not be so pleasing to those who are directly abutting it. That's an issue that we can discuss, at a later date, depending on how we leverage this land. But do you foresee that might be a pretty big gap?
I'm glad you asked that, Councillor Kim. I don't see that as being a big gap at all. I don't think, as I mentioned, people having different preferences as to what type of a sport would be there, or whether it should be, a track with trees in the middle, or whether it should be the world's best splash pad. Regardless of people's views on how it should end up looking, in our view at this point, that's 10 steps down the line. So far down the line. Like the fact that we're still sitting here dealing with a consultant recommending that the town sell the land for profit to service an apparently underserviced area of town at the expense of this land, to us means we can't even turn our minds to what it should end up being, because that's so far down the line. The fact that council is still dealing with the issue of whether it should hold on to this land, to us makes the difference in opinion as to what type of field should be there almost at this point irrelevant. I want to reiterate, we're extremely united on let's use all 6 acres for town purposes. Recreational space, open space, publicly owned lands. It stays in Aurora's hands in a way that we can all use it and benefit from it. So I genuinely think that any differences in sports fields, for example, if that's how it even goes, are so minor at this stage that we don't even need to consider them. At this stage, it's an issue of let's hold on to this land, let's be realistic. The new master plan still says that there's a deficit of parkland in Aurora. Let's work towards remedying that. We can own this land and make the best use of it. I don't think there's anybody here who would, in the face of an expert report that suggests this fits and this is what the town potentially needs, would say no. I've put some houses there. That's not going to happen. So to us, there are such minor variations. And again, it's so far down the line because we're dealing with this really basic issue at this point, which is there's a plan before you that's suggesting that you sell it. So we want to deal with that first.
Thank you, Ms. Curry. Councillor Perry?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Nala, I've always been honest with you. There are some things you said tonight I don't necessarily agree with, but with
I do know that.
With that said, I really truly appreciate you coming out and voicing your opinion and speaking for the community. I just appreciate it, even though I tend to disagree. Thank you.
Thank you.
Councillor Marcus?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Through you to Ms. Curry. Thank you for coming out. I guess I'll take the opposite approach. I couldn't agree with you more than everything what you said.
Please hold off on the clapping.
Yeah. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Through you, I know we've had some talks of as far as what could be creatively put together for the lands. I think that at the end of the day, for myself, and I know for many of you, I think seeing this report doesn't change my mind. I think that some form of green space is what we need for those lands, and that's how I'll be looking moving forward. So thank you again for coming out.
Thank you for reiterating that.
Councillor Gardner?
Thank you. This is supposed to be a question period, but it seems to me you have covered all of the questions we could have asked. And I agree with Councillor Maracas. I think this should be kept as parkland to service your community. And thank you for coming time after time.
Thank you, Councillor Gardner.
Since everybody else has spoken, I do really appreciate you coming out and your continued involvement, but not just you. I know that a lot of other residents here have been just as active, maybe not at the podium, but certainly involved in that debate that we've had for now over a year on that space, and appreciate all your efforts. I think, just to answer Councillor Humphrey's question, I think the impression left from the delegate was that it would come before us, either at this GC or Council X, but I assure you that the comments that you provided tonight will not be lost on any member of Council, and look forward to seeing everybody out when it does hit the agenda cycle. Thank you again.
Thank you very much.
All those in favor of receiving the delegate? So moved. Thank you very much. And again, there will be no further discussion on the item tonight because it's not part of the agenda. You are welcome to stay for the rest of the meeting and the other items that have been pulled for discussion. Members of Council, there are no presentations by the advisory committee chairs that I'm aware of. And so I will move now to considerations of items requiring separate discussion. I will give it a second just in case I can poll the audience to see if there are members here specific to those items that have been pulled. Since I don't see any other members that are here for a specific one that has been pulled, because item 8 was approved. Yeah, you've already dealt with it, so that's great. Wonderful. You're welcome. And the two remaining members in the audience, they're always interested in everything that's pulled, so we'll just start in order. The first item up is item number 1, the proposed sign bylaw, and that was pulled by Councillor Gartner.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'll move as is.
Do I have a seconder? Councillor Perry. Councillor Gardner, the floor is yours.
Thank you. I was very pleased to see the report, and it's extensive and well done. There's one thing I don't agree with in it, and it's on page 2 at the bottom. Well, it starts at page 2 at the bottom. It says the current fees have not been changed since 2002. Are not sufficient for cost recovery. I know that there's been some lobbying, and the decision is to, instead of to raise the prices to the full amount that was originally recommended in the pre-report, we now want to take those fees down. In specific, the sign permit application fee from 100 to 60, and the other one is from 150 to 100 for permanent signs. So I noticed that Aurora's been on the low end compared to the other municipalities with respect to the amount of money we've been getting for signs over the years. So we're behind, and now we're kind of going to still stay behind. So I'd like to hear through you, Mr. Chair, to the Director, apart from the lobby that was received from whatever organization it is that represents signs, in your opinion, why you feel that's appropriate?
Ms. Van Leeuwen.
Through you, Mr. Chair, the recommendation to reduce the sign permit fee that's proposed actually was a recommendation that came from Economic Development Advisory Committee. And they were quite concerned on the impact that the increase would have on small businesses. And so we took their comments into consideration, and we are proposing a fee, just not as large as originally proposed.
Thank you. Follow-up. And is this fee in place for 1 year, 2 year, 5 years? Is there any limit on the fees? When are we going to look at it again?
Councillor Gardner. Or, sorry, Ms. Van Loon?
Through you, Mr. Chair. This fee would be in place until we come forward with a fee amendment at a future date. We could certainly put this fee in place for a period of 2 years and then commit to coming back to council with another fee increase.
So are we approving something for 2 years? Is there something in this report that says?
Through you, Mr. Chair. No, we're not proposing that at this time, but we could possibly, if council directs us, to review the fees again in 1 year or a 2-year period, or perhaps annually when we look at our fees and charges bylaw. That's another option to review it annually.
Thank you. And also on page 19, you say it should also be noted that progressive enforcement costs have not been included. Could you just say what that means?
Ms. Van Loon?
Through you, Mr. Chair. Enforcement is very costly. So when you enter into a progressive enforcement, it requires additional site visits. It requires issuance of orders. It requires follow-up to those orders. If charges are going to be laid, it requires the preparation of a Crown brief, the laying of information with the courts, meetings with prosecutors. So it becomes increasingly expensive.
Councillor Gardner, any
Thank
further?
you, and I will make an amendment in a moment. I wanted also to comment on the sandwich board signs. There's a big change with respect to the sandwich board signs, and they're all over town. And now, from what I see, they're only going to be allowed for open house real estate signs and advertising a special event. So stores will not be allowed to put those out during the day and then take them in at night, which they don't do anyway, but...
Ms. Van Loon?
Through you, Mr. Chair, that's correct. We are proposing that sandwich board signs are only permitted for special events and open house. Our experience is that the sandwich board signs that are placed currently, that you see around town, they're not in compliance with the current bylaw, that they are typically placed on town-owned lands and sometimes on the sidewalks, and they create visible obstructions, as well as they could be a tripping hazard or a mobility issue. So we are proposing that we remove that permission since there's non-compliance at the present time.
Thank you. Last follow-up. As sandwich boards are all over town, used by so many people, how are you going to communicate to those people that they can't do that anymore? And it has to be done clearly and strongly, because we don't want a lot of people in our council chamber, giving us a hard time about this.
Ms. Van Loon?
Through you, Mr. Chair. When we came forward with the outline of the changes to the bylaw in November, you may recall that we are proposing a 6-month transition where we're going to advise and educate businesses and property owners around town of the changes to the bylaw. So it's going to be through an education and communication campaign for a period of 6 months.
And will they also be receiving paper notices? Will they be sure not to miss the change, is what I'm trying to ask.
Ms. Van Loon?
Through you, Mr. Chair, we will work with communications to come up with an easy-to-understand brochure or communication of what the changes are and how it impacts businesses.
Councillor Gardner, before you introduce an amendment, would it be okay if I went to other members?
Of course.
Thank you. I have Councillor Tom up.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and I'll be as brief as possible. So I had a couple of questions. One of them, Councillor Gardner already kind of hinted at with the fees, the fee change, specifically the recommendations coming out of EDAC. So my question is, if the whole purpose is to kind of align the fees with cost recovery, will the reduced fee recommendation out of EDAC, will we get cost recovery out of those fees? And could you just elaborate a little bit more on that, please?
Ms. Van Loon?
Thank you.
Through you, Mr. Chair, it will not be a cost recovery with the newly proposed fees. just based on our analysis of the amount of staff effort in processing an application, doing a plan review, a code review, permit issuance, site inspections. It is not cost recovery.
Councillor Tom?
Thank you, Ms. Van Loon, and I appreciate the recommendations coming out of EDAC. I don't agree with them. I would like to see the original fees that were proposed enacted. I'm not going to move that at this moment in time. That's just my preference. The second thing is about the sandwich boards as well. It's funny that Councillor Gardner had the same inclination in terms of what she was going to bring up with this. The sandwich boards that we see around town, at least that I see around town, currently are on regional intersections. So does this sign bylaw apply to regional intersections?
Ms. Van Loon?
Through you, Mr. Chair, it does not apply to regional intersections. The region has a sign bylaw that regulates their regional roads and regional intersections. However, we do work closely with the region when it comes to enforcement. And as recently as last week, there was a meeting between York Region and town staff to talk about enforcement issues, and signs was one of the items that was discussed at that meeting. So we will be working with them on enforcement.
And thank you. I think that's extremely important to try and harmonize with the region, because if you look at the businesses that are advertising using sandwich boards, it's typically developers, and those developments are not even taking place in Aurora. There are East Gwillimbury, there are Bradford, and all sorts of different developers and businesses that are operating outside of our borders. So to me, I think if we can harmonize with the region on that point, it would be greatly appreciated, because as we all know, they do clutter up our intersections and can be a safety hazard as well.
Thank you, Councillor Tom. Are there any further questions about the report before us? If not, I'll go back to Councillor Gardner.
I agree with Councillor Tom, and I would like to see the original recommendations enforced, but, you know, it is a big change, and it's a big change in many ways. So I would like to make the amendment that this be, I don't know the right word, perhaps Mr. Height, revisited in 2 years' time when we do our regular look at the fees and charges. But at least give a couple of years, really a year and a half, for people to get used to it.
So if I understand you correctly, you'd like to see this reviewed in 2 years' time and with some feedback on the input that the changes had? Is that your amendment?
Well, I would like to see it reviewed in 2 years' time, hopefully to bring it up to par with the other municipalities. But that would be the decision of council at the time.
So we have an amendment on the floor to review this in 2 years' time, if it passes.
Or if there are any other opinions, I'd like to hear them.
Well, first off, do I have a seconder on that amendment? Councillor Tom? If you'd like to speak next on the amendment, that's fine.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. My question would be, are we talking about just the fees that would come back in 2 years, or the entire sign bylaw?
Councillor Gardner, can you elaborate?
I know I seconded it, but I mean, my question is it, well, is it the fees you're asking to come back after in 2 years, or the entire sign bylaw?
No, I'm asking for the fees.
And that's the way I understood it as well.
fee
So I just wanted to
structure.
clarify that.
That's fine.
Thank you.
Further speakers to the amendment? Councillor Perry?
I mean, the way I see this amendment working is sort of like a phasing in of the fees if we so choose in 2 years' time to look at it again. You know, if, for me, when I was at the meeting, and I am the chair of the Economic Development Advisory Committee, I tended to disagree with a lot of the people around us at that point in time. You know, if we're looking at a cost recovery basis, it's important that we're recovering our costs. And so that was one element. And then the other element of what we're looking to do, if it's such a hardship for all the other municipalities in York Region to have these signs, you know, nobody else would be doing it, but everybody's doing it. So I think it is something that can be borne to ensure that it's done properly. So me personally, I am in favor of that.
Speaking to the amendment about reviewing in 2 years.
I think it's a great idea because that's the direction where and how I see it working.
Thank you. Councillor Humphreys?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And in 2 years, but we are also, in this amendment, keeping the original fees, right? I just want, we're going with the exact,
The motion is just to review the fees in 2 years. There is no amendment to change what is in the report
okay,
at this time.
okay.
I have
you.
Councillor Maracas up next, then Mayor Dahl.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Speaking to the amendment.
To the amendment, I agree we should review it after 2 years and take a look at the fees, whether they need to move up, but I would also like to add that I'd like to see those fees, we should just put them up,
That could be a
what the
future
original-
amendment,
Yes.
so right now
Well,
we're just on the,
If I could make an amendment to the amendment, I'd like to do that.
we'll do a second amendment. Thank you. Mayor Dahl?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And just with the, to the amendment, with the approval of the mover and the seconder, can we put a date on that rather than 2 years, say December 2017, so we're very specific as to when it comes back to us? Is that, if that would be acceptable? I just think it might give us...
Is December 2017 acceptable to the mover and seconder, which is not exactly 2 years, it's a year and 10 months.
If I may ask Ms. Van Leeuwen or somebody at the table, when do we review the fees and services? Isn't it in the fall, Mr. Elliott? Through you, Mr. Chair.
We normally review all fees and charges. However, these are under the signed bylaw themselves. It might be appropriate to deal with them all at the same time in time for implementation for the 2018 revenue year and budget. So that would be the fall of
Yeah.
2017.
Are the mover and seconder okay with changing the word to review in the fall of 2017?
Okay, the fall of, thank you, that would be good, fall of 2017, but I forgot to ask a question, and I don't think it's in the report.
To the amendment?
Well, it is in a way, because I don't know what the fees are at the moment.
Right now, the amendment is just about reviewing whatever they will be in that time.
No, but I don't have a baseline. I don't think it was in the report.
Yeah, speaking to the amendment, is there anybody further with the amendment to review in the fall of 2017, whatever the fees will be established afterwards? Seeing no further questions, all those in favor? Are there further amendments somebody would like to put on the floor? Councillor Maracas?
Well, thank you, Mr. Chair. I'd like to put an amendment that we go with the original fees that were suggested from the beginning.
Do I have a seconder for that motion? Councillor Humphreys. Speaking to the amendment to go with the original fee structure. Councillor Tom, question?
Original being what was originally recommended by Ms. Van Leeuwen.
150 and 100.
Okay, as the increase, not the original from 2002.
I believe that's the cost recovery.
Okay, thank you.
The cost recovery model. Okay. I'm going to go to Councillor Perry first because he is chair of EDAC, and maybe he can add to it as well. But speaking to the amendment,
Typically, I'd be in favor of it. I think phasing it in works. To phase in the cost, I'll be voting against it right now, but I don't disagree with what we've spoken about.
Councillor Gardner and Councillor Humphreys.
Could I ask what they are now?
Ms. Van Leeuwen.
Through you, Mr. Chair, the current fees are $30 for a temporary sign permit, and $75 is the minimum fee, permanent fee for, or fee for a permanent sign, sorry. What we were proposing was $150 minimum fee for a permanent sign and $100 for a mobile sign. The amended fees, based on EDAC's comments, are $60 for a mobile sign and a minimum fee of $100 for a permanent sign.
I'll need to think about this. This is a big jump all at once.
Further speakers to the amendment? Councillor Humphreys and Councillor Kim? No, good.
Through you, Mr. Chair, what was the fee previous to our recommendations and not the committee's?
Jeez. I believe Ms. Van Leeuwen just
No.
indicated it was $30 and $75? No. Previously. Gotcha. Ms. Van Leeuwen?
Through you, Mr. Chair, those are the
Yes.
current fees. What we were originally proposing was $100 for a temporary sign permit and $150 minimum for a permanent sign.
Councillor Humphreys? Further speakers to the amendment? Seeing none, I'll ask everybody to put their hands up nice and high for this one so we can follow along. All those in favor of the amendment? Opposed? Amendment carries. Back to the main motion. I believe Councillor Kim wanted to speak.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Through you to Ms. Van Leeuwen, I didn't see anything, I could have missed it, on rooftop signs. Does this new bylaw or recommendations address rooftop signs?
Ms. Van Leeuwen?
Through you, Mr. Chair, the current bylaw does not permit rooftop signs, and we are not proposing that rooftop signs are permitted in the newly proposed bylaw.
Councillor Kim?
And one last question. What is the big difference between banner and banner signs and feather banner signs versus a sandwich board? Because
Ms. Van Leeuwen, can you clarify the differences in those signs?
Through you, Mr. Chair, a sandwich board sign is typically made of plywood, and it's like an A-frame sign, so those...
Sorry to interrupt. I know what they are. Sorry, I was going to say that they don't seem, the purpose of them and the size or the weight, it's not that indifferent. But the sandwich sign, you can't have sandwich signs unless it's advertising a special event or like in real estate open houses, whereas banner signs, they are allowed. Given that they're slightly more obstructive than sandwich signs, I'm just wondering why there's more leniency towards banner signs than sandwich signs.
Ms. Van Leeuwen?
Through you, Mr. Chair, there are the banner type signs that are affixed to a building. So those are currently regulated in our bylaw. I'm sure you've seen the feather banner signs that have sort of popped up in the industry over the last several years. And we are proposing to regulate these types of signs. They are affixed to the ground. So the difference being that there is a level of, I guess, stability with respect to those feather banner signs because they are affixed to the ground, whereas an A-frame sign is not. So the wind can pick up, it can knock them over, they can be tripping hazards, those kinds of issues occur with an A-frame sign.
Does that clarify things for you, Councillor Kim?
Yes, that's fine. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other speakers to the motion as amended? Seeing none, all those in favor? Motion carries. On to the next item. Item number 2 was pulled by Councillor Peary. Councillor Peary, would you care to move the staff recommendation?
To be honest with you, I'm not able to tonight.
That's fine. Is there somebody who would like to move the staff recommendation? Mayor Daw, is there a seconder? Item number 2, the one in front of us. Do I have a seconder for staff recommendation? Councillor Maracas. Councillor Peary, the floor is yours.
So, over the last few years, I've had the pleasure of working with a lot of industrial guys looking to grow, looking to build new buildings. And development charges are definitely a cost that I think inhibits growth in the municipality. And my fear is if we're passing this motion as it reads tonight, what in fact we're saying is wait, don't build for 2 or 3 years because your development charges are going to go down, or there's a good chance that your development charges are going to go down if you're an industrial user. And so I would much rather see us moving on this now to bring more business to town as opposed to holding off, having this report in front of us. So my preference would be for option number 1 as opposed to what we have in front of us.
Thank you, Councillor Peary. Further speakers? Mayor Daw, then Councillor Gardner.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and I certainly appreciate Councillor Peary's point of view. One of the challenges, of course, is that the regional DCs are substantially higher than ours. And for the most part, the region will not be opening their DC bylaw until 2017 is when they're looking at it. So I'm not sure that, and perhaps maybe to Mr. Elliott, what difference it would make with respect to if we moved ours forward. Well, fair enough. But just if Mr. Elliott could bring that out.
Mr. Elliott?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. On consecutive 24 or page 2 of the report, depending on how you're accessing your reports, you can see that if the town-only DC charge was modified, our retail charge would go up by 62% and our non-retail use would decline by 11%. However, when you blend that impact with the regions and the educational DC, the retail use goes up by 5% and the non-retail goes down by 1.75%. Given that magnitude of only 1.75% impact to the overall DC cost, staff are of the position that let's hold off and do it as part of our regular update rather than investing the time and costs of updating the DC bylaw midstream. Currently, that work is very heavy in a number of our departments, and it's not currently contained within their work plans for the next 2 years.
Thank you. Murdoch?
I apologize, Councillor Perry. I was confusing this with another issue.
Councillor Gardner?
Thank you. Through you, Mr. Chair, to Mr. Elliott. Mr. Elliott, so you may have answered this question, but doing the split be considered in the preparation of the town's next DC bylaw, is that because of the region?
Mr. Elliott?
And because we're in the middle of a cycle?
It's more a case of the economics of the process of doing it. We're almost halfway through the term of the DC bylaw now. It will be up for renewal, and we're suggesting that we do it at that time. Our new bylaw is planned for the first quarter of 2019, and so this work would begin probably in the fall of 2018.
Councillor Gardner?
Thank you. I got exactly the same impression that Councillor Perry got, which would be, I mean, the two Cs have a very large area that's waiting to be developed, and the developer actually has come to us with this suggestion. If there is even a chance that this may be changed in the next update, if I were that developer, I would be very hesitant to go forward, and then we lose tax money in the meantime. So it's a concern to me. The other thing is, I mean, this makes sense to me. We have enough retail development in Aurora. I'm not worried about the retail development. I'm worried about doing everything we can to stimulate employment that will bring in lots of jobs and perhaps better taxes. So I can't agree with this motion as it is.
I'd like to ask Mr. Ramuno.
I think Mr. Elliott wanted to.
Before we do that, if I can just go to Mr. Ramuno to find out whether he or a member of the economic development team have had any feedback with regard to the DCs associated with those industrial uses, and specifically to that question that people may hold off for a couple of years until those figures are revisited. Have we had any comments from any of the people that we deal with? Mr. Ramuno?
Through you, Mr. Chair, I'll be honest, no, I haven't had any feedback. I can check with my staff, but I haven't.
Perhaps we could do a little bit of investigative work and bring those comments back for next week's council meeting as well. I think that might help members of council to know whether or not there's some concerns by the industry. Thank you.
Thank you.
Just to add, I think I've spoken about one side of the coin, and the flip side of the coin is we're going to have an influx of retail growth in certain parts of town if we do move forward with this now, because they are going to be penalized a lot more if they wait 2 or 3 years. There are pros and cons to that, and I won't disagree. You know, that having some jobs in town are better, but so that's one. And then the other comment I wanted to make as well, the numbers provided in the report are great, but in my view as well, a lot of industrial growth, I think, would be larger than the 25,000 square feet that we have mentioned in the report. I don't think it would be uncommon to see, 50,000 square feet, 100,000 square feet of industrial spaces being put up. And so when you factor in the growth of that, we're talking about for somebody who wants to put up 100,000 square feet, which would be a great employer for this town, that's an extra $400,000 or $450,000. So in my view, I think it just makes sense that if we're leaning in this direction, we go for it now, so that we incentivize the growth now, as opposed to having a lot more retail and a lot more parcels of land that are zoned for industrial that just aren't ready to move forward because financially it doesn't make sense.
Thank you, Councillor Perry. Before I go back, and we go back and forth between Councillor Perry and Councillor Gardner, is there any other members of council that would like to participate? Members, before I go back to staff, just members of council. Councillor Kim, and then I will get a comment from Mr. Elliott in a minute. Councillor Kim.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I think I would like to, it would have been nice to have an idea of the quality of the jobs in terms of the retail versus industrial, or retail versus non-retail. We're assuming that industrial jobs are higher quality, higher paying, but it doesn't, there's no figures here to indicate that industrial jobs will necessarily mean that it will be more jobs versus more retail. My instinct tells me that there'll be more retail jobs, but lower paying, but conversely, if you attract more non-retail usage, there'll be lower jobs, but higher quality. And just reading the report, it didn't seem like if you did have a split DC between retail and non-retail, to have a 1.7% change in DC payments be enough incentive for non-retail to locate in Aurora. And my instinct is that that's not sufficient, and if we're really going to make that change, you might as well really be on the extreme side to make it really incentivize them. But at the same time, my only concern with that would be that the loss of DCs, and we're not allowed to compensate by charging other segments at a higher rate, and which means that it would fall on taxpayers to share that burden. So for that, I'm leaning towards to approve the report as is.
Thank you, Councillor Kim. Mr. Elliott, you had a comment you'd like to make?
I do. We spoke with the Office of the Economic Development, Mr. Aurora, and he suggested that if he had the opportunity to make a recommendation, it would be that rather than the strict retail, non-retail uses that the region uses, that we would introduce some other, he used the phrase scoped approach, where we would target specific sectors for lower DC rates and shift that burden back onto the other burdens. And this would help us attract the type of jobs, the type of investment that we as the town of Aurora are particularly hoping for and hoping to attract to our community. And to do so would take quite a bit additional consultation and additional analysis in preparation for that. So he's suggesting that we take a scoped approach as we go into the bylaw renewal on schedule.
Thank you, Mr. Elliott. Further comments? Councillor Gardner?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And to me, a scoped approach is really forward-thinking. It would really force us around this table to think about what kind of businesses and jobs we are really trying to attract to Aurora. So I'm in favor of that. Is this through you, Mr. Chair, to Mr. Elliott, is this a consultant's report we're looking at?
Mr. Elliott?
No, ma'am. The consultants assisted in recalculating the rates for us. We then put those out together with a discussion paper to the community. We received the two feedbacks, two sides of the same coin, really, one from a retailer and one from an industrial developer.
Thank you. It's noted in this report that the city of Guelph did something like this and then had to go back on it because it didn't work for them. But the comment is that it didn't work, may not have worked for them because they were unclear about their definitions. So I would just like to be very clear, because I've always heard the term ICI, which is industrial, commercial, institutional, and then retail has always been outside of that mix, that the region never considered it as, employment. So what are we talking about here? With this report, our definition, are we talking about retail and then opposed to that, office, industrial? Thank you.
Through you, Mr. Chair, it would be the region's current definitions. They're very technical, but it is substantially simply retail versus all other non-residential uses.
Thank you. And am I correct, through you, Mr. Chair, am I correct in assuming that the region generally considers retail as not employment land, and that's why they limits it in the business park area?
Mr. Elliott?
Mr. Chair, I can't comment on how the region views that sector of the economy.
Thank you. Councillor Gardner, anything further?
Thank you. Just my understanding is that retail was never considered as employment land that municipalities want to attract uses for and jobs for, that retail is outside of that mix because it is generally part-time, seasonal, non-permanent, non-benefit based jobs and lower paying generally.
Further speakers? Seeing none, all those in favor of the motion before us? Against? So moved. Carried, I mean. Up next is item 3, pulled by Mayor Daw.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'll move the staff report.
Do I have a seconder? Councillor Maracus.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. My only comment on this, and I don't have a problem with the report, I don't have a problem with increasing it, but I just think it's an opportunity for us to get a little tighter on our forecasting and our budgeting on this. So I think it's because that was the first thing I looked at when I saw it, is why the increase. And I appreciate that we budget based on certain items or in certain criteria, but I just think this is an opportunity for us to go back, look at how we do that, and see how we can improve that process. So other than that, I will certainly vote in favor.
Thank you, Mayor Daw. Further comments? Seeing none, all those in favor? Approved. Next up is item 7, and that was pulled by Councillor Gardner. Can you move the staff recommendation, Councillor Gardner? Seconder?
Sorry, I can?
You can.
I can?
Thank you.
My mic is on?
Councillor Tom seconds it. Councillor Gardner, would you like to speak to it?
I just have one comment. I found this interesting because we've done our building, as far as I can tell. We've done the Family Leisure Complex, we've done the JOC, and I don't know what else is in the works, but I'm not sure of anything at this for the next year. And so we would have spent, and we would have had the most need for geotech in the past. So going forward, I don't understand why we would have the same amount of money in the budget for the next 2 years as we had in the past, unless there's some building going on that I don't know about.
Mr. Simonovskis?
Certainly through you, Mr. Chair. The two facilities, actually, the funding for that soils work was done within those two facilities. This funding is for all of our other construction projects, our roads, sidewalks, and any other activities. They all have a geotechnical component, and this fund is part of that requirement. So this is actually an ongoing need that we have outside of our sort of one-off building construction projects.
Thank you. Councillor Carter?
Thank you, and I should have asked you that outside of the meeting. I just ran out of time. Thank you.
Any other further comments? Seeing none, all those in favor? It's approved. Next up is the lead status report, and that was pulled by Mayor Daw. Move as is, seconded. Councillor Perry? Mayor Doc?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And there was some discussion a couple of weeks ago with respect to the type of lead certification and the challenges around that. So Mr. Simonovsky has put together this report, and it does actually go back probably a year and a half when some of the challenges around going to LEED Gold were brought up, and I certainly forgot about some of them, and so I apologize for that. But whether or not I think it's important to note that whether or not we hit LEED Gold, the building will still be LEED Gold or LEED Silver, the building will still be as efficient. There are items in the whole concept of LEED that I don't particularly agree with, to be frank. One of them is, are we on what kind of bus route are we on, as an example? I don't see how that changes how our building will operate. So I just think it was beneficial for Mr. Simonovskis to bring this report forward to discuss some of those other items. And again, I apologize to council because I wasn't able to be that quick on my feet last time when this came up. So I appreciate Mr. Simonovskis bringing forward this report.
Councillor Marcus?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Through you, I guess, to Mr. Simonovskis, I'm just curious. I'm reading through the report. Is there any guarantee that if we spend this extra money that we will actually achieve gold?
Mr. Simonovskis?
Through you, Mr. Chair, there isn't any guarantee. It's really how well documented the various points categories are submitted to the CGSB and what their response to that scoring is. The consultant has been saying consistently throughout this process, if you target 3 to 4 points above the threshold, you're pretty well guaranteed to get that because it gives you some room for any differences in opinion. So personally, I've never been through the LEED certification process, so I'm relying on the consultant's advice in this area. So that's the target that we're shooting for, and based on their experience, they're confident we should get that certification.
Thank you. And I guess just as a follow-up through you, Mr. Chair, were these points? I guess I'm just a bit confused. Were these points not identified by the consultant? Was it not their job to identify these points from the beginning when we asked them that we would like to achieve that gold status? And if they were identified, then why did we not meet those if they identified them at that early stage? And why at this point are they saying that, well, now we need to look at those different points to get to that status?
Mr. Simonovskis?
Certainly, through you, Mr. Chair. Those points were always identified, and I think the important message here is that there's two primary components to the LEED process. The building itself, the efficiency of the building has always been targeted to a certain level, essentially guaranteeing a silver or well within a silver range. Those design elements were identified early on in the process. To move from silver to gold, there was a couple of adjustments that were made within the design itself, but not that significant because the next step up from a building efficiency perspective was fairly expensive. And one example would be going from a rooftop gas heaters to actually going to ground source heat pumps, which was a huge step up, which was never contemplated in the scope and far outside of our budget. So the consultant's position was we will monitor the points accumulation process through the construction period, and at some point in time we'll have to look at alternative points opportunities to ensure we have sufficient points. As we're nearing the end of the project, the consultant has come back, and now that they've verified or identified the feasible points through the design and construction process, because initially during the design, keep in mind, they're forecasting where they thought the points could be accumulated. Well, now the building is completed. They've been going through that process with the contractor and the architects to make sure that everything actually fits the criteria, and they're coming back saying, okay, we're getting close, but we need a few more points. We've always talked about these administrative points. Now's the time to make a decision because we need to get over that threshold. The primary reason why this is coming forward is because there's a fee for those administrative points. One thing to keep in mind is that this fee is within budget. We're anticipating not needing to spend the money, or if we were going to spend the money, it would be made at a point later in the project, at the end of the project. So we were always aware that this was a possibility if we didn't get that threshold. And here we are at the end of the project, and we recognize, or the consultant has recognized, that there's a few points needed to make us, or put us in the right range. And so hence the report coming forward. I do have to apologize, though, with the last status report. I should have been a little clearer in separating out the actual lead cost, which is about $9,000, versus other increased requests, which I've clarified in this report as well.
Councillor Marcus?
That's it for right now. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Further comments? Councillor Peary? Councillor Gardner?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I've stated in the past, I like LEAD. I don't like all the reporting and all the paperwork that you have to go along to get it. In future, next time we do a build, I don't want us to achieve LEED. I want us to build a green building. For the same reason in the past that I was against Bullfrog Power, I didn't see the value in it because I saw it as a marketing tool more than, green initiatives. LEED, in my opinion, is more of a marketing tool than it is, an indication of your commitment to sustainable buildings and to creating green builds. So we're down this road now. I'm not, thrilled that we're down this road. But in future, I don't think we should be going after LEED, but we should be building to the LEED standard.
Councillor Gardner? Councillor Gardner has the floor, gentlemen.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Through you to Mr. Simonovskis. Mr. Simonovskis, I'm looking at page 6 and 7 of your report. 7 is the chart, and the third one down is EAC1, Optimize Energy Performance. Can you go to the paragraph on page 6 that speaks to item EAC2, particularly the solar panels and on-site generation of energy?
Mr. Simonovskis?
Yes, through Mr. Chair. Is there a question, or are you looking for clarification or description?
I'm not sure. I'm not sure. Can we generate energy on site? And I'm also found it. I was put an exclamation mark beside it when you say here that the solar panels were always a consideration, but were not part of the original project scope and intended to be pursued after project completion. I don't remember that, and I don't remember discussing the cost of it. So if you could...
Certainly, through Mr. Chair. Through Mr. Chair. So solar panels were, at the time that the design was proceeding, we were also pursuing the feed-in program for the SARC, and recognized that there was value in considering solar panels for future installation, knowing that it was really, our initial goal was to get a building in place. So we basically designed the building and one of the outbuildings, which was actually deleted from the project, to accommodate solar panels at a future date. Now, solar panels provide a fairly large opportunity for additional lead points. And because it was something that we were considering as a future item, we thought we'd explore it as an opportunity to advance that project to essentially garner some additional points relatively easily. And what I've done is I'm only speaking to the lead elements. I'm not speaking to the solar elements at this point in time because we're just in the midst of discussions with a couple of agencies as to what the options or possibilities are. And we have a follow-up meeting this week, and then I'll bring a report forward in early March on the outcome of that. But suffice it to say that solar panels are an option. Unfortunately, the feed-in tariff program may not be an option because of availability at this point in time, as well as fairly significant reductions in those revenue, the cost per kilowatt revenue options. But that being said, we do want to explore it, so I will bring back a report with some additional details on the solar option, and may even recommend that we don't pursue this at this point in time. But I think it's only fair to bring it forward as another opportunity for points for that lead goal target.
Councillor Gardner?
To you, Mr. Chair, when is that report going to come back?
Mr. Simonovskis?
Through Mr. Chair, it'll either be the first or second cycle in March.
Thank you. Further questions, Councillor Carter?
I guess the question is for on-site, I mean, so there are a lot of potential opportunities there, on-site energy. Is solar panels the only one at this point is viable?
Mr. Simonauskas?
Through Mr. Chair, yeah, it's the only one that really makes economic sense at this point in time.
Thank you.
Before we go around for a second time, for myself, I brought this issue up previously, and my perspective is a little bit different than what I'm hearing around the table. We rely on the information provided in the reports to make decisions. And when I look back at the reports that we had previously, the language in those reports with regards to the JOC and any conversations we had around LEAD programs is significantly different than the language in the report today. The language in the report today talks about pursuing goals and targets and hopefully we can make it kind of thing. But there was no uncertainty in any of the prior reports that we had. The prior reports talked about the building was approved for gold, that we paid money for gold, that we marketed. We had lots of material that we went out and marketed and said this building will be gold standard. There was no uncertainty in the language. And so that's the challenge I have. The challenge I have is that we made decisions based upon the fact that it will be gold. It never was raised that there was uncertainty. Even in the report that we have in front of us, one of the motions was specific to the fact that we asked staff to come back with a report on the implications of going for gold standard. Nowhere in that was any sort of conversation or information about there being a risk or there's a challenge with getting it. All of that stuff is now finally coming out. And it speaks to the integrity of the reports that we get. We established a task force to oversee these issues. The task force mandate, if you look at it, was to raise any issues that come out, any risks that are part of the process. And the task force didn't even see this. Had I not brought it up and mentioned it, it just would have gone away. And so I think that there is a real concern with the information being presented, and it's not about the minutia, it's about the reports. We need to have confidence that the information we're being given is correct. It can't come out later on that, well, in retrospect, we should have been more forthright with the information. That's not good enough for me. Speakers for the second time. Councillor Kim.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just want to, support what Councillor Thompson just said, in that, I was kind of surprised and almost, pretty well embarrassed myself for not having caught such a big gap there in terms of the numbers and obtaining, not even obtaining the gold standard. And I think so something has to be done going forward to ensure that there's more due diligence and just more detailedness in ensuring that these reports are followed up on. And I guess that's it. And as I learned, since the last report, just reading more on leads, it seems like it's more of a PR thing than anything else. I'm not sure why town is in the business of necessarily having good PR. Even the system, it's, you get 1 point for having a bike rack in front of the building, as well as a point for having a solar panel. It's more design-based, I'm finding, than it is performance-based. There's no way for leads to even follow up in terms of our energy saving and water usage or electricity usage. So I'm in line with Councillor Peary in terms of not having a desire to have any more projects involved with leads going forward. And those are my comments. Thank you.
Councillor Humphreys.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and I won't belabor the issue as well. A little disappointing, but what I think is really important when it speaks to reports is, and I think we talked to CEO earlier today a little bit, is perhaps having a real, executive viewpoint on what's the what's in the report, because it's a big report and you have to sift through it to find some of the critical nature of the report. So for me, it's understanding some significant changes as the project goes along. I thought we hired a project manager as well to make sure that we would have a real focus on the build. So I'm a little disappointed. I'd like to see this avoided. We did have a really big information session. We were all there. It all was very clearly stated what we were building towards. And a lot of decisions were based on that, the extra spend initially as well. So I really don't want to see this happen again. And I'd really like to know way ahead of time, clear and concisely, what we're really buying into and what we can, what the risk is, what the risks are. If there was a risk on this, if we knew from the beginning, we wouldn't have gone this direction for sure. Thanks.
Thank you. Further speakers? Seeing none? All those in favor? Opposed? So moved. Carried. Next up is item 12, pulled by Councillor Humphreys,
Thank you. Move as is.
seconded by Councillor Maracas.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just very quickly, very happy to see this on our agenda and moving forward. Just a couple of quick questions, and sorry, Mr. Bruno, I meant to give you a shout earlier today as well, but just very quickly, one of the things that mentions the panel is going to be doing is, along with looking at projects that come forward to town, they're also going to look at some of the things that are listed under duties of the design review panel, page 128, A, B, and C. And I'm interested in the C listed properties of the town's inventory of heritage properties. So from your perspective, do you see one of the actions proactively that the panel will be doing is looking at our existing listed properties and coming back to the Heritage Committee on their recommendations of keeping them listed or not listed? I just want some clarity on that.
Mr. Bruno.
Through you, Mr. Chair. No, the intent of identifying, A, B, and C really just relates to those properties that where an application does come in and typically go to Heritage Advisory Committee. Those are the applications that we will consult with the design review panel to receive their input on design matters.
Perfect, great, thank you, that's great, appreciate that clarity, thank you so much. And just another quick question, I know that this panel has no members of council, town staff, or any of the board committees, which is fair. Is that typical of other design review panels such as this?
Mr. Bruno.
Through you, Mr. Chair, yes, it is, and we worked with the clerk on this, and really, we want to get a representation of for panel members to come from one of the four sort of professional associations: architects, designers, engineers, planners.
Thank you. I think that's great. And just, it's sort of an administrative issue. It does mention that the panel chair is going to be responsible for documentation or minutes. Will they have some administrative support at the meetings to ensure that that's captured correctly, or are we leaving it with the chair?
Mr. Bruno.
Through you, Mr. Chair. Yeah, staff from the planning department, myself, and my staff will be in attendance at those meetings.
Perfect. Great. Thank you.
Councillor Marcus.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just want to say I think staff did a great job putting together the terms of reference for this for the design review panel. I'm looking forward to having it start up and seeing how it works and how it develops. Just wanted to read one aspect from the report on page 128, and it states at the bottom of the first paragraph, the town's official plan to promote the conservation and enhancement of Aurora's cultural heritage resources, to tell the story of a community's evolution and provide important visual reminders that can help define a sense of place. And I just wanted to make mention how important heritage is in Aurora, and how important it is for us to protect historical features, lands, properties. So I think it's great that we're moving in this direction, and I'm looking forward to it.
Thank you. Councillor Tom.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Brief question. with respect to the criteria, and this might be getting into the weeds a bit, but I'll be brief. The Northwest Heritage District has some specific design requirements with respect to the style of architecture that can be placed in that area of town. My question is, obviously, the design review panel is going to have to take that into consideration, so they're not going to be able to recommend or not, approve something that won't apply or adhere to what's already in place.
Mr. Romano?
Through you, Mr. Chair, that's true. It's a good point, and we'll obviously make the panel aware of our conservation district plan that's currently in place for the Northeast District. Yeah.
Further questions? Councillor Gardner?
Thank you. Thanks to Councillor Marakis for having this great idea and to staff for doing a wonderful job. My comment is about section 4.1 on page 7 and the panel nomination criteria. It looks like we're going to have an amazing panel of planners, engineers, architects, landscape architects. It doesn't mention, though, that they should have work experience with historical properties. And I'm wondering whether, through you really to Councillor Marakis, whose idea this was, maybe we should just put that in just as a reminder.
Perhaps Councillor Marakis would like to weigh in.
I think it's always been my intention that for setting this up, that a preference should be given to those that have a background dealing more with historical type properties. Maybe Mr. Ramuno is that something we could add in as far as a preference when the applications come in, that we would prefer people, like, a few people that have that dealing with historical properties as a background?
So, Mr. Ramuno?
Certainly, through you, Mr. Chair. No, I think it's a good point. I don't have an issue with amending section 4.2 to include high-quality design in the field of architecture, landscape architecture, urban design, and heritage planning matters. So I can certainly. Yep.
Like in a job application, right? It's like preference will be given to, et cetera.
Thanks. I mean, I know absolutely that's the intent, but I'd like to put it in black and white. And the last question I have is on page 11, the map. It's very hard to see. A question through you, Mr. Chair, to Mr. Romano. Did we ever designate the town park as under a heritage designation?
Mr. Romano?
Through you, Mr. Chair, no, we haven't. We did designate the Armory building, though, not town park.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you for that.
Thank you. I find that
Further
a little bit strange.
comments or questions? Seeing none, all those in favor? Carried. Next up is Community Recognition Committee meeting minutes, and that was also pulled by Councillor Gardner.
Thank you. The only comment I
Before
have...
you...
I move the motion as is.
Thank you. Seconded by Councillor Marakis.
Thank you. The only comment I have is on page 2, part 2, when the Community Recognition Awards were held, I don't know for how many years, in the council chamber, and all of the councillors gave out awards, and it was really, really great and really neat. And then when the process changed in 2011, that process changed. The councillors were no longer involved. So through you to the chair, can we please be involved with giving out the awards?
I won't allow that question. No. Through you to Mr. Councillor Marakis.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So I guess I'll just give a brief rundown of what the thought is and where we're going with the award ceremony. It will be held at Town Hall once again. It will be held here in the chambers. We, as council members, will be presenting one award each That is the thought so far of the committee. We are also looking at possibly, we're going to make it more of a formal night for us where we would be dressed up. There was some discussion today actually at the meeting where council members and Mr. Mayor, yourself would actually walk the guests in and seat them, and that might be a really intriguing aspect of it to kind of, add a little something to it. Pizzazz, thank you, a little pizzazz to it. So there's that, and then afterwards, after the ceremony, we're gonna we will have some videos of each winner, and then we will be heading upstairs, kind of like our inauguration type of night where we go up there. Everyone can kind of mingle and and talk and discuss with the winners and get to know everyone and move on from there. So that's kind of a rough idea of how the night's going to go.
You might have to clarify whether or not ties are mandatory for some councillors.
Yeah, we actually, for council, will probably make it ties mandatory, so thank you. Sorry, Councillor Perry, but...
Councillor Perry might be voting against it. Any other comments or questions about the meeting minutes? Seeing none, all those in favor? So moved. Carried. Last up, we have Councillor Tom, who's pulled the terms of reference for the 150th committee. Do I have a seconder? Councillor Perry? Councillor Tom?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just wanted to bring this up. We had the first meeting of this committee was on Thursday last, and it was good to meet the citizen members of the committee. I know that Councillor Marakis was there, myself, and the mayor. And I know that this came up, and I know that there's some questions from councillors about, whether council members will be on the committee or not. And I know the clerk has given us information on that, so perhaps he could elaborate a bit. I guess I could let you elaborate, and then I can continue talking first.
Mr. Cook?
Thank you. Through Mr. Chair, yes, and I thank Councillor Tom for allowing me to, or asking me to elaborate. What's before you is the terms of reference that actually have been considered sort of jointly by staff and also the committee members who met last week, where the committee members focused on the duties and responsibilities. The recommended composition of the committee flows from an earlier staff report on this matter that had recommended that the committee be comprised of 5 citizen members and the mayor and 1 other member of council. And staff have continued with that recommendation in the proposed terms of reference. It would be also staff's recommendation that the committee do include members of council as is normally done with most committees and set out in the policy, so that they may act as a liaison, a conduit of information between council and the committee as the work of this ad hoc committee goes forward. That would be my clarification.
Thank you, Mr. Hike. Councillor Tom?
Thank you, Mr. Clerk, and thank you, Mr. Chair. So, obviously the hope of this committee is that it's going to be a community-wide and an inclusive place that everyone who wants to participate can. And so I'm going to make an amendment, and we can discuss, I suppose, people's interest in such an amendment when I make it. But the amendment would be to alter the terms of reference to include only 1 member of council, and that would be the mayor on the committee. If I can get a seconder, I can elaborate on why I think that's a good idea.
Councillor Perry? Seconds the motion. Go ahead.
So, obviously, as members of council, we all have the ability to go and attend committees, as I think every member of the public has, and we can participate. And that way, I know there's more than 1 member of council that would like to participate on the committee, and I think that we all should participate. And this way, with the mayor being there as a conduit for council, as the clerk has just described, he also can chair the meetings to ensure that there's some, flow to the meetings and such. And he's got a lot of experience chairing meetings and some fairly rambunctious ones as well. And so I think that kind of settles both. That means we all can participate, and it can be as inclusive as possible. And those members of council that would like to attend meetings and participate can. And it's not excluding, And then the other thought is that if we're going to alter the terms of reference the other way to allow for more members of council, then the council or the committee would, in my opinion, would get dominated by councillors, which I don't think is the intent. So to me, this kind of settles both. It allows for that conduit and a chair in the mayor, and all members of council, if they so wish, can attend and participate.
Thank you, Councillor Tom. Councillor Marquez, Councillor Gardner, and
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Through you, I guess, to our town clerk. Did the Aurora 150 have any council members or even Mr. Mayor sitting on?
I don't know if the clerk can answer that, if he remembers for sure.
Okay.
But I don't believe they did. Right on?
Under our procedural bylaw, the mayor is ex officio of all committees.
And I agree.
I did attend the 150.
No, and I agree, and
assessments
I guess I guess what I was trying to get to is that since you are ex officio, is there really a need to actually name you to the committee? Like was just said, you could just show up, and we can show up and be part of it. I think a lot of us made the comment that when we talked about creating this committee, there was some general consensus that we should take the councilors out of the equation and allow the committee to run as a citizen-led committee, same as the Aurora 150. So, and as you mentioned, you are ex officio, so I think it would still allow us to accomplish what we're looking to do.
Thank you, Councillor Gardner.
I like the idea of having somebody from council on the committee to just keep us completely in the loop, because this is going to be a big celebration. If we do take one of the council members off, I think we should still keep the number of committee members at 7. It's good to have an uneven number. And also my question through you to, I'm not sure who, there's also going to be staff support with this committee. I'm hoping that Shelley Ware is going to be part of this committee through you to...
Mr. Downey, is the ever-popular Shelley Ware going to be involved?
Through you, Mr. Chair, my understanding is staff has not, no particular staff has been designated to this particular committee. It depends on what the issues are that the committee brings forward. The staff members that would be most appropriate to come forward or provide some technical support to the committee would then be brought to the committee meeting. And so we have not designated any particular staff. It depends on the issue.
But just to add to the comments previously, the Sesquicentennial Committee did have staff support, did it not?
Through you, Mr. Chair, what happened was originally it did not. It then became the request of the committee to have staff support, and staff support was provided. In fact, Shelley Ware was provided to the committee, however, only on overtime hours. There were no additional staff hours available for her to sit on that particular committee, so overtime was paid to Ms. Ware for her sitting on the Aurora 150 committee.
Thank you. Councillor Gardner.
Thank you. And my recollection was that there was a consultant hired to be on that committee. But I'll just say it again. We have an incredible would have an incredible staff advisor in Ms. Ware, and I know she loves to do these kinds of things, so the committee would be in great hands. So my vote is for her.
Mayor Dahl, speaking to the amendment. The amendment is to reduce the committee member to just yourself.
I actually think there would be benefit of having an additional council member on there. So just speaking to the amendment, before we go back to the main motion, I don't think I'll support the amendment because I think we would benefit from that.
Thank you.
And it's not to cut anybody else out, it's just in order to be a little more, I guess, specific on reporting back to council. And we just had Councillor Maracas update council with respect to the CRA committee. So I think there's a substantial benefit to having a councillor as part of that committee, preferably chair.
I'll keep going around the table. Councillor Humphreys.
I think, Mr. Chair, I'm not sure why we're going this route when we had a really successful 150th Aurora that was beautifully done without any politicians in the mix. So I don't really think it's the right thing to do. I think we should just leave the citizens on their own, do the thing. I do think we need to look after them with staff support for sure, because with staff is really what you need there. The only thing I have is a concern and a comment is, have we been approved for the federal funding and the grant for this committee? That was one of the stipulations.
No, but we'll come back to that on the main motion. Is that okay? Or do you need that for the amendment piece?
No, you're right.
Thank you. Thank you. Councillor Perry?
I would only say for the same reason, I'd be advocating for a second regional member. The mayor can't always attend all of the different events, and, because of that, it makes sense, in my view, to have, somebody else there who is a voting member, just in case, if it's needed. So I will be voting against it, but I understand the intent.
Councillor Kim, anything you'd like to add
Yeah,
to the amendment?
the amendment was just one additional, then I don't think I would support the amendment as is. I would support an option to have as many people. So, that's all I can say about the amendment.
We've gone around once. Does anybody have something new to add to the amendment? Councillor Maracus?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I guess I'm just questioning, how did the Aurora 150 survive without any council members or the mayor there? I just don't understand how they were able to survive and put on a great show. And yet
But the
here we are.
amendment is to reduce it from 2 to 1.
Well, 2 to 1, and I'm saying it should be 0. So therefore, I'm talking to the amendment. So I just don't understand how, on one end we put on a great show and didn't have anyone there, and on this one we're saying we need someone to be a conduit to the rest of the council, and we did it before, and we didn't need that conduit, and we didn't need the interference from the politicians. That's my only concern.
So we'll now vote on the amendment. The last word is to you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I mean, I don't think anyone's saying that they need it, but it's my understanding too that the Sesquicentennial Committee had former councillors on it who would be equipped to chair meetings that members of the public may not be. I'm not saying that they can't. It's not an impossible job. I'm just saying there is value in having a council member or the mayor sit on a committee. All of our other committees have councillors, chair and vice chair of the committees. It's not that out of the ordinary. I agree with you. You don't want politicians mucking it up, but I don't think you're going to have that happen. I mean, the committee will be dominated by the citizen members, and currently there isn't any former councillors we've selected. And so I think it would help to have at least a member of council, and I think the mayor, chair the meetings to ensure that the meetings move forward smoothly. That happened last time in the form of a former councillor, or more. I think there may have been more than one. And so I think that it's important that we at least have someone who can do that. But let's just vote on the amendment, and we'll see what happens.
We're going to vote on the amendment. All those in favor of reducing the composition to just one member of council? Opposed? The amendment fails. Back to the main motion. I will remind members of council that we can always split the motion, and you can vote however you like on the third clause. We had a question with regards to the federal grant from Councillor Humphreys through you to Mr. Downey. Mr. Downey, do you have any information you can add?
To you, Mr. Chair, if you recall, staff presented a report to council with regards to putting in a proposed schedule of events and then applying for the grant to see if we were going to be successful. Council chose to have this committee prepare that scheduling of events, so that has not taken place. So therefore, the grant application has not taken place. Even with the schedule of events that are going to be proposed by this committee, it will be up to the federal government as to whether they wish to fund it or not.
Thank you. Does that answer your question? Further questions to the main motion? Seeing none, as suggested, we will split the vote. If members of council are okay, I will group clause 1 and 2, and then we will vote on clause 3 separately. All those in favor of 1 and 2? Carried. All those in favor of 3? Opposed? Councillor? That clause fails. You'll certainly have a chance next week.
Because the terms
Members of council, the clerk's informed us, though, that we will need then an amendment or alternative to amend the terms of reference to remove that third clause. Councillor Maracas?
I guess I,
Perhaps let me just go to the clerk first, just so Council Clerk, because I see some confusion, but the terms of reference that are attached clearly indicate that the composition would be a mayor and one member. Since we have voted against it, we need to also have a motion to amend the terms of reference, but I'll just have the clerk clarify it, and then I'll go to you, Councillor Marcus.
okay.
Yes, thank you. Through Mr. Chair, Mr. Chair, you described this scenario quite accurately. The terms of reference that you're approving says that the membership will include 2 members of council, including the mayor and 1 member, 1 councillor, and 5 citizen members. So therefore, you would have to actually amend the terms of reference by amending that second clause to say, so that the terms of reference for the Canada 150 Ad Hoc Committee, attachment 1 to this report, be approved with the following changes and set out those changes.
So that would be, the following change would just be 5 members of the public.
Correct.
Is that
Yeah,
moved by Councillor Maracas, seconded by Councillor Humphreys? Councillor Tom, you may speak.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I mean, we made reference to the grant approvals, and that need to take place. And again, my amendment was defeated, and that's fine, but I really think that in order for this to move swiftly, it would really benefit the committee to have someone who is experienced in chair now. Maybe the citizen members of the committee are more than capable to do that. I'm just wondering, for essence of speed, to get grants from the federal government if we can't help this along. But again, I'm seeing around the table that that members of council don't want members of council being on this committee. I just think that's a mistake. I think that there should be at least 1. And then if 1 is not the choice, I think 2, the original recommendation would be my preference. But time is of the essence to get these grants out, so the learning curve has to be pretty steep for this committee. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Tom. I have Councillor Humphreys, then Mayor Daw, then Councillor Perry, then Councillor Kim, and then back to this side of the table.
To you, Mr. Chair, and if I'd make any friendly amendment, which I won't do to belabor the point, I would ask that 1 member of staff join the committee to help with that grant process. That, to me, way more beneficial than having a councillor or politician.
Thank you. I'll just remind everybody that
non-motion.
I will say that on point 8 says the town staff will provide technical support to the committee, so that could be a broad definition. I have Mayor Daw, then Councillor Perry.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Perhaps it's just me that sees the irony and that people on this side of the table who are politicians suggesting we shouldn't have a politician on a committee because it'll be too political. I don't quite follow that. We just talked about the Community Recognition Awards. That's essentially a community committee that has a politician on it. So is that not too political? Should we ask that person to step down from that committee? I don't understand it. I think we're playing
Question
politics.
of privilege, is the mayor insinuating anything?
Mr. Chair, I've got the floor.
What exactly is the question of privilege?
That the mayor is insinuating that I'm playing politics. I don't really take that. I would like an apology for that. I'm not playing politics here. I'm stating a fact that the one committee that
Thank
did
you. Mayor Daw, please choose alternative words and identifying specific people.
I wasn't pointing out specific people. I'm saying that the concept that we're suggesting some committees can have a politician on it, and that's okay, and some committees can't have a politician on it because that's political, strikes me as ironic.
Thank you for generalizing.
And I don't follow that. I don't agree with it. If we want to do that, then there should be nobody on this side of the table on any committee.
Councillor Perry, speaking to the amendment.
From a logistics standpoint, I think it's easier for 3 people to miss a meeting than it is for 4 people to miss a meeting. We don't have too many committees that have 5 individuals on them, but a lot of them have a hard time making quorum. So from a procedural standpoint, I don't think, again, this is the best way for us to be doing it. I agree with the mayor that we are on a whole bunch of committees. I don't find myself ever being political on the committees. I'm there to offer guidance. I'm there to offer support. So the argument that we are, by virtue of sitting around this council table, unable to participate in a discussion without being political in nature, I don't agree with that at all. I think the last committee was very well served by having individuals who were familiar with council to sit on it, and they don't have that. And I think that there is a missing link by not having any members of council who have council experience in any capacity, in any formal capacity on that committee. So I think we're making a mistake. We'll just see what happens, but I wish the committee the best.
Councillor Kim?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. My position is, I understand where Councilor Marcus is coming from. At the same time, I do understand Mayor Dawes' perspective as well. For me, I would either like to have no members of council involved, or have the possibility of having anyone who's interested be involved. Whether it's one or two councillors, or whether it's all 9 members of council, I think it should be open to everyone, so that those who do want to participate are not missing out. And although I understand the one perspective, I think one has to admit that certain committees have a higher profile in the community than others. I think, not for not to put down our finance committee, but I don't see people, members of the public, just kind of cramming down our doors to attend our meetings. But I'm sure there are other committees that there are a lot of participation, and maybe that higher profile. So I understand where the one perspective is coming from. So my view is, I will support Councilor Marcus' amendment, because it does fit my 2 criteria. If there's going to be another option, then I'd rather have everyone participate, or none at all. Thank you.
Thank you. I still have some speakers for the first time. Councillor Marcus.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I get if anyone wants to be there, just like was just stated actually right at the beginning, if anyone wants to be there, sit there at the committee and put their point of view forward, we're all welcome to be there. Why do we need to actually have one of us sitting there as the chair or the vice chair? Like I said, I think the Aurora 150 worked very well. And as far as the experience of the members that are there, I met them at the first meeting, and I'm quite confident at the qualifications of a few of them. There's one that works for another municipality and is fully aware of how council works and what needs to be done. There's another one that actually has been around the world and has delegated to different agencies. He's fully aware of how the system works. So I don't see what the issue is as far as to turn around and say that we don't have anyone on this committee that would be able to, and you can roll your eyes all you like, Council Perry, but that's what I.
All right, I'm going to call a question of privilege on that one. To make an insinuation that because I disagree with the councillor, I'm putting down any of the members or their qualifications is wrong, it's erroneous, and it's disrespectful to me and to other
Councillor
members around the
Marcus,
table.
please, let's have some decorum.
Sure, I'll choose my words carefully. I believe, in my opinion, that the membership of the committee is fully qualified to chair and vice chair this committee, just as the Aurora 150 had fully qualified and competent members to chair and vice chair that committee. And we put on an excellent display and an excellent show for the residents, and I believe that this committee can do the same thing without any interference from this council.
Councillor Gardner, would you like to weigh in for the first time? Before I go to other members of council.
Who knew this was going to be such a subject of discussion? Is there going to be any kind of financial oversight for this committee? Will council be putting forward a budget, and
I will direct that to the CAO. I will allow him to weigh in on this now. He feels lonely.
right?
Yes, thank you for the opportunity. I would imagine that the financial oversight would come from 2 perspectives. One, the staff member sitting on the as support, and also any actions that this committee wants to take would have to be sanctioned from council, since there would be applications made which may or may not have a municipal contribution. So I'm sure the actual oversight would come from council at the end of the day.
Thank you. In that case, I'm fine with the amendment, but I also need a follow-up, or maybe at some point, We have applied for the grant, have we not?
I believe. Mr. Downey, would you like to comment?
Through Mr. Chair, there's been no application for a grant. So we're talking about an event that hasn't got funding at this point.
Exactly.
I do remember some discussion around that, but there will be a grant available that we will be able to apply for?
That was stated previously, yes.
Thank you.
For the second time, Councillor Humphreys, Councillor Tom.
Through you, Mr. Chair, and bear with me, guys. Okay, the terms of reference came at us, and there's no staff on here, right?
I believe under number 8, it says staff support.
So does that, sorry. Town staff will provide technical supports committee as required. Okay, perfect. That was my main concern. For me, it's the last committee, I know what their biggest struggle was. It was getting staff support. It was not support from council. They love it. I know many councillors went and supported them and provided, whatever support they needed. And but I know one of the things was staff, and staff is critical due to their experience. And here, their first assignment will be to write grants. I don't know how experienced they are at writing grants, but that's even more critical than chair. They're not going to be chairing meetings unless the federal government provides them a grant. Okay, I just heard that's not true. I thought we had met, no, before you do, JT, through you, Mr. Chair, when we passed this committee to be put together, one of the criteria was that we would not have a budget associated with this committee unless we had federal funding. And one of their primary things to do was to put a grant together aligned with their ideas of what they were going to do for events and submit to the federal government. If we were to get the budget, we would go forward and the committee would continue and have support from staff. If that's changed, I need to know that right now, because one of the basis of me approving and going forward with this ad hoc committee was the funding from federal government. This is Canada's birthday, not Aurora's. We had Aurora's. We need the federal government to help fund this, because every other community in town will be probably doing the same thing. We don't have budget for this right now, and we made budget for the Aurora's birthday. My concern here is that we're going to put this committee forward. We're going to add we want to add members of council, and what if it doesn't go forward? We have to disband. And I hope we let them know that if we don't get funding, this is not going to continue. I was worried about this. I was worried about it from the beginning, and I thought it would have been a better idea to have staff put the grant together and submit for funding and then get a citizen committee. But now we're here, and the very first thing we need them to do is to get the funding for the events that they are going to come up with and do. So I just want to be clear on that. And if that's changed, then
I'll certainly direct that to staff. I'm not sure if Mr. Hike or Mr. Downey is best.
Thank you. Through you, Mr. Chair, I can say that actually the committee was made aware of the limitations, that they was all subject to financial consideration. Staff have the authority to apply for the grant. However, to apply for the grant, we have to define the events for which we are applying for the grant, and the committee was made aware that their first responsibility will help shape those definitions so that staff can then subsequently apply for the grant. However, as I will just reiterate that the committee members were made aware that any provision of any events or any activities will be subject to the availability of funds through the grant.
Thank you. Through you, Mr. Chair, then even more critical than ever, I'd like staff, technical staff, to support them, to get the timelines ready for their ideas and for getting the grants written. To me, that's way more important than having someone like me, and I'm not accusing anyone of being political. My apologies if I went too far in that statement. I just feel that the qualifications may not necessarily be chair right now, and co-chair, be more technical support to get the timelines written out at a high level and to get the grants written. That's from my perspective.
Councillor Tom.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And like Councillor Peary, although I won't go as far, I wasn't really stoked on the comments from Councillor Marakis either. But that's okay, I can take it. The reason I'm not is because committees, as you is well aware of, all the committee meeting or committees that are appointed by this council to advise this council are made up of citizen members. That's the whole point. Why would, by his model, we shouldn't have any politicians involved? Because they'll get political about it.
Members of council, let's stick to the issue
This
of
is the issue.
having 5 citizen members run this committee.
This is the issue we're talking about. So if my point is that we appoint citizen members and councillors to every other committee of the town, including the Community Recognition Ad Hoc Awards, the Heritage Committee, and it goes on and on. Comparing this to the Sesquicentennial, although I wanted it modeled on that committee, and I think it's a good model to follow. We've gotten advice that it might be beneficial to the committee and help the committee to have members of council on it. Now, I would have been fine with one. That amendment failed, so we'll move forward. And again, it's not because I don't believe in the qualifications of the committee members. We pick them based on their qualifications. So we obviously think that they're qualified people. And so that point by Councillor Marakis was also incorrect. But simply stated, you were insinuating that
Gentlemen,
we didn't say that.
I'm going to cut off debate. I'm going to cut off debate now. We're going to vote on the amendment as it stands. I will cut off debate. This has gone on too long.
Well, then I'm gonna have to strenuously object because Councillor Marakis.
The amendment on the floor is just to amend the terms of reference to 5 citizen members. All in favor? Motion carries. Opposed? There you go. There's your opportunity.